Welcome back to the first team. I am Joe DeLeon, and joining me as always is my good friend and NFL draft analyst, Ryan Roberts. Today, we've got another position ranking show. We're almost done. I think we've only got I think it's edge, safety, tight end, running back, quarterback. I think that's all the remaining ones that we have. But today, we're going to be doing interior offensive line, that being the guards, that being the centers of the 2024 NFL draft. Ryan, it's a pretty nice grouping. We were
Yeah.
texting a little bit about this. If you combine them, it becomes
Mhm.
a pretty good list. If you separate them, it's complete dog s. It's not very fun to break down separately at all. But when we look at the group as a whole, I think there's a lot of really good names that are going to go on to be some really good pros in the NFL.
Well, I mean, can I say it like this? If you separate them, I still like I like the center class. I think the guard class is the one where you're just kind of like, that tapers off pretty
Yeah,
quickly. So I combining them. I mean, I got to like number 10, Joe, and there was like a little internal debate between 10, 11, and 12. And that, the 11 and 12 that didn't get on the list because they all had pretty similar grades. So it became almost like a, pick your poison. I kind of always defer to the guy that I feel is a little bit more scheme versatile than the guy that's a little bit more, scheme dependent. So that's kind of some tiebreakers occasionally. But it's going to be a really fun conversation, though, because there's a couple guys in this list that some people might have as tackles, in the rankings. I think even you might have at least one of these guys as a tackle in your potential rankings. So this is where we kind of separate what people believe about players positionally, and you always get some of the tackle to guard converts in these conversations as well.
yeah. There's it's truly difficult to project how we might view a player positionally, and then the
Yeah.
NFL might bring a guy in, and just purely based on the fact that they might need him to play another position could impact where he steps in. Like, really good example, Ricky Stromberg. We talked so much about him
Yep.
and being a really good center, and then he goes on to play guard, and that's what his role has been with the Commanders. Maybe he goes back to
Yeah.
center. It's just been kind of like weird to look at a guy like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, those guys that are kind of the backup types, they obviously have to assume multiple roles potentially and to see where they fit. But I would even say the Peter Skoronsky conversation from last year, right, Joe? It was like the NFL obviously, well, at least the Tennessee Titans viewed Peter Skoronsky as an interior player, starting at guard all year. But I personally still would have given him a chance to stick outside because I think that he had enough overall athleticism to be able to make that transition. And then you always get into the conversation of, Zach Martin when he was coming out. He was a college left tackle. Does he fit better inside, outside? We had Rashawn Slater a couple years ago where his arms were right on the threshold of tackle versus guard. I mean, those debates always happen, and it always takes one team, right? And
Yep.
ultimately, it always takes one team to determine where a guy fits. I mean, I think that there's probably a couple teams that maybe would have selected Peter Skoronsky and given him a realistic chance at offensive tackle, but that's where Tennessee ultimately saw him, and that's where he's going to be projected long term, and that's kind of the eye of the beholder, I guess, is kind of for lack of a better term. You're trying to figure out where you functionally see them, but obviously people see things differently this time of year, especially.
I will start us off here with my 10 through 6. As we always do here, we share the 10 through 6 before we break down fully 1
Yep.
through 5. My number 10, guard slash center, Bo Limmer from Arkansas. Center, Cedric Van Pran from Georgia is my number 9. Number 8 is Javion Cohen from Miami, the guard. Number 7 is Graham Barton, the guard slash center slash maybe even a tackle from Duke. And then the last one, number 6 for me, is Cooper Beebe, the guard from Kansas State.
Okay, a lot of familiar names. First, the getting this out of the way, I have not finished regrading Cedric Van Pran, so I don't have a deep
Yeah, he's
conversation
fine.
about him. Right. I mean, I remember the 2022 film. Like that was kind of my thoughts. Was like this might be a starting center. I mean, like we'll see. Potentially. Talk to me about Javion Cohen, Joe. Talk to me about him. I am missing it with him, man. I'm trying to like him so much, and because he finished outside of my top 10, there's just something about him that just seems clunky to me, man. Like I don't know.
So here's my deal with him. Yes, he
Yep.
is not the easiest mover. And yes, he's
Yes.
not like this super crazy twitchy athlete, but I
Mhm.
like his build. I think he's very thick. He's very wide. He's kind of got that downhill approach to way that he plays. I think the power is
Yep.
really good. That I just
It
think that
is.
if you just look at the general frame and power profile, this is somebody who I can draft on day 3, and they could be like a really middle level guard, just like a really
Okay.
just average guard. I
Fair.
don't need him to be like dominant. I don't think he's ever going to
Right.
be a top 5 guy of any interior offensive lineman, but like I Jonah Jackson's like a really good example of somebody who comes to mind where like Jonah Jackson
Mhm.
was fine coming into the league and then had a really strong past couple of years, which earned him a big contract with the Rams. I wouldn't be surprised if Javion Cohen doesn't end up having that type of a progression.
I felt like he had bad weight on his frame this year. I remember watching him at Alabama. I thought
Yeah.
his frame was just a little bit cleaner than where it was at Miami. That was kind of my big thing. I'm glad that you mentioned, and I'll get to mine in a second here, but I'm glad that you mentioned Bo Limmer because I feel like he's a guy that people forget about in this class for some reason.
And
Because I,
speak very negatively on. I've seen some people speak very well. Our friend Keegan does not like Bo Limmer. He
oh, I
DM'd
like
me
Bo
over the
Limmer,
summer.
man.
I
I like Bo
posted Bo
Limmer.
Limmer, and he's like, I forget what he said to me, but he was very critical of my evaluation of
I,
him.
I like Bo Limmer, man. I really do. I remember in the summer, I was pretty. I mean, I'm probably still relatively the same high I guess I was on Bo Limmer in the preseason. Like I think he's a quality potential starting center on the NFL level. I think that I
Or
think it is,
guard.
Joe, or guard. Yeah, he could. I personally do like him at center a little better, but I think it was because Arkansas was just pretty bad this year, right? Like it was a pretty rough offensive sequence, and then we've kind of forgotten about him a little bit. So that was a couple thoughts there.
Yeah, I think that I like the flexibility. By the way, I found Keegan. I'm sorry, Keegan, to put you on blast because I know you tweeted me. He says he has a PFA on him, which I completely
Ooh,
disagree with. Or this
ooh,
was over the summer though. He thought that he would be a PFA type guy. I think that he goes late day 3, early, or sorry, late day 2, early day 3.
yeah, yeah,
I like the
sure,
flexibility, good movement
mhm,
skills. That's kind of where I placed him. All right, let's hear year
yeah.
10 through 6.
Man, you better be careful. By the way, Keegan listens to the podcast, so he's gonna come
That's
for
why I
you.
said I know you're probably tuning in, Keegan, but we're gonna get
All right,
shat on
10
tomorrow.
10 through 6, sir. 10 through 6. Number 10, Zach Zinner from Michigan. I
Okay,
have number 9, first convert potentially. I mean, he's played some guard, but I have Brandon Coleman from TCU at number 9. I have Bo Limmer, Arkansas center at number 8. Here's one that people are going to hate. Number 7, Jordan Morgan, offensive lineman from Arizona. I graded
that's
as
not
an interior offensive
unreasonable.
lineman. And number 6, Christian Haynes, offensive guard from UConn.
Oh,
Mhm.
wow.
Yeah,
You don't wow.
I like Christian Haynes.
I'm
I have a
shocked by
third
how much of
round.
a gap that you and I have on Christian Haynes. I'm
I have a
really in on Christian Haynes.
I have a third round grade on Christian Haynes, dude. He's a top 100 player to me. I am in on Christian Haynes. I am in on him.
The only thing that sticks out to me, Zach Zinner. I liked him. I just kind
He's
of
rock
wonder
solid, man.
if he's at his
You
ceiling,
you
you
know
know.
how you describe Javion Cohen though is exactly how I feel about Zach Zinner. It's like he's a tough guy, he's pretty physical, functional athlete, nothing special, and he's just like gonna be fine in the NFL, right? Like there's nothing special about Zach Zinner, but I could see him just latching on and maybe being a part-time starter for the better part of 6 to 7 years. Like that is Zach Zinner to me. I think he's just rock solid, nothing special.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, I'm gonna start us with our top fives here. Jordan Morgan from Arizona
Oh,
was
okay.
my number 5, and that's why I don't think your placement of him at 7 is really too controversial. Somebody who I think could slide into the end of the first round, more likely to be probably an early day 2 pick. For
Yep.
him, his movement skills aren't anything to get super excited about because he's a little slow redirecting. He's not one of those guys
Yeah.
that's going to like really uh comfortably mirror, which is why I think that he has to make that transition to guard. I do not trust him out in space. But what I love about Jordan Morgan is, one, he's very flexible. He
Mhm.
sinks very easily. He's one of those guys that's just got the ginormous ass, very wide base. I'm a big ass type of a guy when we're talking about
Big
offensive
ass guy.
linemen. That is
Yeah.
an important thing for me with Lyman. But the thing that excites me is the power, particularly in pass protection. I think that he's one
Yep.
of those guys that can be a total eliminator in pass protection, and it shows up a bunch of times. UCLA was one of the games that caught my attention where I was watching Gabriel Murphy, and Gabriel Murphy is like a fine edge rusher. He's okay. He's
Yeah.
not going to be like a super productive guy in the NFL, but he completely eliminated him every single time that he went against him. So I really like the steadiness, the base, the power, all that stuff that he presents as a guard.
I don't think we see him that much different. I have him at number 7, and I agree with a lot of what you said, Joe. Like I think that some people overestimated the athlete that Jordan Morgan is. Like functionally, I think he's good inside. He's okay on the edge. The problem is that he doesn't have a ton of length. He has some injury concerns, obviously some durability. That's specifically the last couple years, and I will say that the biggest thing that I love is he's got some great latch strength, man. Like
Yep.
when he gets his hands inside and he's able to get inside positioning, reps are over pretty quickly. Like I like him a lot. I just coordination, foot quickness, I just think are average to below average, right? Like so that's why I think he ultimately is a guard next level, and then he has sub 33-inch arms. When I know some people hate the threshold conversation, but show
It's
me a
important.
good offensive tackle that had sub 33-inch arms, and I will buy you a new house. Like we'll just leave it at that, right? It just doesn't happen too often. So I like Jordan Morgan. I think he's a good starter, potential next level. I have a mid third round grade on him. I think he's a top 100 football player. I don't dislike him. I just think that when people start talking about him as a slam dunk first round pick, that's just kind of where people lose me a little bit. Just lose me a little bit.
You're number
Num-
5.
Number 5, Graham Barton, number 5 from Duke is my guy here, Joe. I I've had kind of a back and forth with Graham Barton. I remember watching him in the preseason, and I didn't dislike him, but I was just wanted to see a little bit more. I think that he obviously is not a tackle in the next level. He's got very short arms. I think just athletically, he's good. Like, he has good overall athleticism. I think, though, that there's a little bit of lack of core strength, but I think that when you're talking about potentially moving into center, which funny enough, Graham Barton has actually played center in the past at Duke. Like, I think that he works really nice well up to the second level. I think the guy competes. I think the guy is pretty flexible. I think he's got good hips, good mobility throughout his core. I just don't think that he has great latch strength at the point of attack, and I do not think that he has obviously the requisite length to blast outside. But as a starting center on the next level, I'm in on Graham Barton. I think he's got good starting material to be a starting center on the next level potentially.
My very simple explanation for why I'm not in the first round camp on him and why I
I'm not
think that
either. Yeah.
this is a day 2 pick. He
Yep.
is just so down the middle average. He is just so average,
You
which
don't
is
think
not
he's
a
a good
bad
athlete
thing.
though? You don't think he's a good athlete? I think he's a
I
good
think he's
athlete.
a
No?
slightly above average athlete. I didn't
Wow.
think that
Okay.
he was a guy that really exploded for me on tape where I saw the ceiling. I think that he's kind of close to his ceiling and
That's
that we're
fair.
not going to get him much better than what he is right now. I think he's fine. I think he's going to be a day 2 pick that ends up being a steady starter, but that
Mhm.
is the ultimate full ceiling that we're going to get with him. My number 4, who I think you're probably higher on than me, Zach Frazier from
A little
West
bit.
Virginia. I really love what Zach Frazier brings to the center position. We hear the comps to Jason Kelsey because like this is the closest that we're going to get to him where he's got the wrestling background. He's got
Yep.
a very powerful upper body,
Mhm.
really quick, fluid feet. He reaches so easily. This is the perfect, ideal guy that I look for in a zone based scheme because he's going
Yes.
to be able to move and track guys. And he can bury dudes too. Like he really
Mhm.
understands leverage and body placement. You kind of get some vibes of Tyler Linderbaum from a couple of years ago, some similarities in the way that they approach the position with their frame and how quickly they move. But Zach Frazier to me is one of those few centers that you could take on day 2 and is going to be a nice starter as soon as he steps in the
Yep.
NFL.
Yeah, I have a firm actually, I have an early second round grade on Zach Frazier, so he's number 3 for me. So just a little bit of a difference there. You had him at 4, I have him at 3. I think Zach Frazier, you mentioned the wrestling background. This guy hand fights about as good as anybody in this class, man. Like he's got really active hands, he's got active feet. And he has just been a guy that whether he and for me, yes, I think in a outside zone heavy scheme, he's tremendous. But I do think that he has enough requisite physicality and power to last in a gap scheme as well. Like he's not going to be as dominant in that scheme potentially, but I do think that he is a pretty scheme versatile player. Just think he's going to be a plus starting center in the NFL, man. He's just going to be a good player for a long time, in my opinion. So he might not win. Like we'll talk about Jackson Powers Johnson, obviously, early later in this podcast, Joe. Like he's not going to look like Jackson, right? As far as being just like bigger and just a little bit more of an exciting athlete. But Zach Frazier is a good athlete, good power profile, really functional movement skills, and he's got really good footwork out of his stance as well. I was really not upset, but I was disappointed that he wasn't able to participate at the combine. I know he did some like on field work, but he wasn't able to
Mhm.
test because I think he would have tested really well, man. He's a
Yeah.
very good athlete on film. So I'm in on Zach Frazier. He's number 3 for me, but narrowly edged out. Number 4, who I think is one of the most overthought players in this class. Okay, overthought. I'm not saying first round player, but I'm saying firm second round grade for me, mid second, that I think is just going to be a good starting guard on the next level. That's Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State. I really like Cooper Beebe, man. I keep watching him, Joe, and so this is my trajectory of Cooper Beebe. Remember watching him for the first time, I'm like, I like that kid a lot. And then I remember going back and watching him and saying, I started to have like those doubts of like, is he a great athlete? You know, is he near his ceiling? And then I went back and watched him again. I'm just like, I don't think we quite appreciate that he's a better athlete than people act like. Is he phenomenal? No. Is he a guy
Yeah.
that is just going to jump off the screen? But then you see him at the combine and you're like, oh, he might be a little bit better athlete. And I think that we underrate him a little bit just because he had a little bit of bad weight on his frame the last 2 years. But I think functionally, he's a good enough athlete. And I think that if we're talking about power in your mitts, like this dude, when he gets inside of you, reps are over. Like they're over. Cooper Beebe is an incredibly physical dude. Kansas State ran outside zone. They ran inside zone. They did some gap stuff as well. Pin and pull at times. Like they did a little bit of everything. Cooper Beebe had experience and was efficient in all of those areas.
I agree with you that Cooper Beebe is going to be a really good starting guard in the NFL because, like, he's physical. He brings the intensity that you need. I just, I try not to get too hyped on him because, like, he looks so good on film. The
Yeah.
big thing that I just try to keep reminding myself is he's really stiff. Like he's
Oh,
just
he's a
not.
guard though. He's guard.
He's
He's a
just
guard.
not a
Yeah, sure.
flexible guy. Well, that's why I kind of value some of these other interior guys more because I see more flexibility. And I
Yep.
and I agree with you. I think that Cooper Beebe is a
Yep.
better athlete than we give him credit for because we're so focused on his stiffness. And I don't want to get too all in. And that's why I'd rather value a Jordan Morgan a little bit more because there's more work that could be done with Jordan Morgan. I think that Cooper Beebe is who he's going to be in the NFL right now.
So you're doing the bit, right? The mystery box. You know what's inside the mystery box. It might be Cooper Beebe. Right. Sure. Okay.
Yeah,
We'll do that. We'll do that.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
My number three
Yep.
is the center from Oregon, Jackson Powers Johnson. I really love him. I think that he is going
Wait.
to. We'll get to the. We'll just calm down for a
I'm
second.
confused. I'm confused. I'm confused. Okay,
Number
go ahead.
number three for me. I
Yes.
think that Jackson Powers Johnson is going to end up being a mid to late first round pick, purely off
Uh-huh.
of need of trying to look for a center. I
Okay.
love the length that he brings for for a center, and I think he could play some guard too, depending on the situation that he goes to. Really good upper body strength. I don't think his movement skills are anything to like really gawk at and get really excited over. But what helps him win, despite not maybe being the most mobile center, is that he is just so savvy with his
Mhm.
leverage and his placement. But I think that some limitations in his mobility is why I'm not like saying that this is the number one interior guy like some other people might have on their rankings.
Okay, forget it. I just figured it out while you were talking. I'm so sorry. Jackson Powers Johnson, though, perfect segue, Joe. Had him at number 2. Narrowly beat out Zach Frazier. I think that when I went back and watched the last couple games of the year for Jackson, I think it really solidified things for me because early on in the year, I thought he was really good, but I still thought there was a little bit of inconsistency in his game, as far as consistent footwork, and I thought the hand placement was a little sporadic early on. I thought he improved a lot because I think we forget this Jackson Powers Johnson's first year as a full time starter and first year at center. Like we forget about that a little bit, right? So he has all the requisite size, good athlete, physical, scheme versatile. He is going to be a plus plus starting center. Like if he's a Pro Bowler in 2 to 3 years, Would not be shocked at all. I think Jackson has that type of upside to him. So he was number 2 for me. So we see him very, very similarly.
Okay, so your number 3 was Zach
Zach
Frazier. So that
Frazier.
now
Yep.
I can give my number 2, who is Christian Haynes from UConn. Dude,
Whew.
I am
I love
so
him, man.
in.
I do. I
I
really like him.
love Christian Haynes, man. I've been on the bandwagon for him to be a late first rounder. It's probably not gonna happen. I think he deserves
Yeah.
to be an early second rounder. I just love the demeanor, man, and I think that I wanted to see him move a little bit better to the second level this upcoming year, and there's just so many positives on film just watching him work to the second level eliminate guys. Like he's a
Yeah.
headhunter. He tracks down linebackers, defensive backs if he needs to. Um, very good leg drive, very good just overall power, upper body, lower body. Despite him being stout, he has good length, so that eliminates that what I thought was a concern completely for me. I like
Okay.
these guys that are squatty, that are low to the ground, and have the right length. And I think that someone like Christian Haynes is going to pan out, and we're going to be like, "What the heck? How did this guy end up maybe not going in the end of the first round? He goes somewhere in the second round, and then we're questioning why didn't he didn't go sooner."
So I know you said you're petitioning for him to be a late first round pick. What is your actual grade on him though?
I have a top 50 on him.
Okay. Okay. So you have a probably an early second type of thing
Yeah,
on him. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay. Hey man, I have a I have an early third round grade. You have an early second round grade. We're this is this is the conversation between, one round of difference, which isn't like a heavy difference when you really think about the conversation. I think he's going to be a starting guard in the NFL. I think he can play center if you needed him to, but I think he's a guard on the next level. I think he reminds me a whole lot of Shaq Mason, who's been a very good guard in the NFL for a
Mm,
long time. My biggest gripes with Christian Haynes, because I agree with you in the sense of I think he's very strong, especially in the upper body. I think that he is a very good mover functionally. I think he can really work out in space. I think his angles of pursuit, working to the second level, need to improve a little bit. I think his footwork is there's some false steps out of stance a little bit at times, but I think that he has all the requisite athleticism and physicality to be a very good player on the next level. So we don't see him too differently. You're bullish on your boy Christian
aggressive.
Haynes, man. You are bullish on him. You
UConn,
really are.
UConn, go
Yeah.
Huskies, go Huskies.
Uh, you're a big
Um,
UConn guy. Oh, wait,
so
you can't get out of the can't get out of the Northeast, man. You just can't get out of it. So
yeah, exactly. So you gave your number 2 as well, so that means our number
yeah.
1 is both Troy Fautanu. You
Yes.
were big on him over the summer, nobody talked about
Yeah.
him, and then now all of a sudden he's the de facto guard, number 1 in this class. What makes
Yeah.
Troy Fautanu so good is the flexibility. He is so freaking flexible. He is
Yeah.
probably one of the most fluid guard prospects that I've ever watched. I'm sure that you could probably agree.
Yeah.
Overall, like, just general power is not in the upper category of all the guys that we're
Solid.
talking about today, but it's good
Yeah.
enough. I just
Mhm.
think that once we bump him inside the guard because of his size profile, he is going to be so fun to watch. And if he ends up in a zone scheme, that's going to be even more perfect fit. But I think he could be relatively scheme versatile.
He's a lot longer than Zach Martin because Zach Martin had 32 and some odd inch arms. And we're talking about a kid that has 34 plus inch arms. But I see a lot of parallels to their game. Like Zach was functionally, Zach Martin could have played offensive tackle, right? Athletically, flexibility wise, could have. Powerful interior offensive lineman that I think really has every tool in the toolbox to be an absolute Pro Bowl level player every single year, potential All Pro. Now, there's going to be an internal debate. Well, actually, not an internal debate. It's an external debate, I guess, out there right now of can Troy Fautanu play offensive tackle in the next level? And this would be my answer, Joe. Yes, he can, but this is the conversation that we always have that I think is a fascinating one. That would I rather a guy be good at a position or be great at another? Right? Like he could be a good functional offensive tackle, starting caliber player, or he can be a great interior player. Right? And I'm always going to go for where I think the guy's potential best fits. Yes, he has good length. Yes, he can play outside of his frame, but I think when he plays inside of his frame, he's just better. Like he's just better. And I want to reduce that space a little bit. I want him to kick interior defense linemen's butts all day. I want him to work to the second level. I want this kid to be able to play a little bit more loose inside and be able to be a little bit more confined in tight quarters. Because if he is, I think he
Hmm.
has superstar potential. Could he be a good offensive tackle? Yes. Could he be a great offensive guard? Absolutely.
I think that, and please tell me if this is a bad comp because you always
Okay.
do. Maybe this is lazy because they're both coming from Pac-12 teams. They're both, uh, you know, I don't know
Can
if
I
they're
guess
both
it?
some. Okay,
Can I guess it? Can I guess it?
go ahead.
Elijah Vera Tucker?
Yeah, I don't think that. I think it's a decent
That's
comp
okay. It's
because
okay.
like
Yeah,
we're
it's fine.
could have maybe played tackle,
Yep.
but they bump in and then they bump in and they end up being really good.
It's not a it's
Relatively fluid and movable.
yeah. I think from a physical profile perspective, I actually think the comp works a lot. I personally did have Fautanu graded higher, but I think when you're just talking about play style and physical profile, I think that there's some parallels there for sure.
I have no idea if they're both Hawaiian or Samoan, but that's what I
Why
was
don't you
gonna
just
say. Is
why don't you just guess so you can be super offensive potentially to someone?
well, that's why I'm not gonna push forward on that. But uh, that was why I was gonna say maybe it's lazy because I'm going with
It's not lazy.
Samoan or
It's not
Hawaiian
lazy.
guys. But
No, it's not lazy because they had the flexibility to potentially play offensive tackle, probably fit better in guard, and they are similar size profiles and athletes. So it makes sense. It makes sense. I gave you credit for it, man. I said
all
good
right,
job.
comp of the week right there.
Yep.
Folks, thanks for tuning in. Drop a comment below. Let us know what you think of our rankings at Joe DeLeon at Rise and Draft. Appreciate you tuning in, and we're going to be back with more. Enjoy the rest of your week.